Welcome to the Vancouver UFO meetup and the Alien Agendas meetup. Our guest is Mary Rodwell. It's an honor to have her. Mary Rodwell is recognized internationally as one of Australia's leading researchers and writers in the UFO and contact phenomenon areas. And Mary has researched more than 3,000 cases and suggests extraterrestrial encounters are a global phenomenon. This is evident in the new humans referred to as star children. And Mary's going to give a presentation called Mary Rodwell on the New Generations of Human Children, as well as Hybrids. So welcome, Mary. I had Mary on my show about 2 years ago. We did a couple of videos, so it's great to have you back. You haven't aged a day, Mary.
Thank you, Brian. I'm going to share the screen now, and then I'll start the presentation. And I want to, more than anything, give a package, a way of explaining how I've come to certain conclusions or hypotheses. So I'll share screen now, and hopefully that comes up. Let's do this slideshow. Here we go. Right. So this is really why, for me, it was so important after so many individuals and families and children contacting me. The question is, what's this all about? What's going on? What are, or is there, certain agendas? And for me, it starts really with our history. But more than anything, it's about us exploring what this whole phenomena is about. One of the most fascinating statistics that we had when I got involved with the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Free Foundation and the surveys that we did, which were nearly 600 to 700 questions. And we asked a myriad of questions about DNA, about the experience. All of it was conscious recall from the individuals. And what we discovered was something very pertinent to what Nikola Tesla is saying here. The day science begins to study of non-physical phenomena, it will make more progress in 1 decade than in all the previous centuries of existence. And what we discovered that was fascinating was this, that out of the 4,200 people, the physical side of this experience was only 25% of their experience. 75% was actually out of body. That I'd like you to keep in mind. This is all the survey, and its information is in Beyond UFOs, the Science of Consciousness and Contact with Non-Human Intelligence. What we also discovered, and you will see from this presentation, was the extraordinary changes in individuals after contact, which not only gives it validity, because you change after a fantasy or imagination, but also the extraordinary changes, many of them multidimensional. Dr. Edgar Mitchell himself was talked about the experience of contact with non-human intelligence is the key that will open the door towards understanding what the relationship between what is consciousness and contact with non-human intelligence. So we're talking about consciousness, the science of consciousness and contact, the bridge for exploration of human multidimensional realities. So we're talking about spirits and ghosts, UFO contact, mystical meditation, shamanic experiences, channeling, remote viewing, near-death experiences, etc. The human phenomena, including consciousness itself, has eluded rigorous scientific description, not because of insufficient evidence, but due to the lack of theoretical construct which could fit within the prevailing paradigms of science. And this is where we've gone with the whole free organization. Dr. Rudy Shield is one of the co-founders along with myself. And this is what he said: the quantum universe supports information transfer from mind to mind at the speed of thought, far exceeds the speed of light, and the quantum hologram formulation sensibly explains and allows for all these modern miracles. So we're looking about, again, at all these interesting aspects of what are considered the paranormal, whereas I consider now, as many others do, it's normal. Dr. John Mack, a wonderful light in helping us to understand this phenomena, and a great loss, I think, to ufology. The experience of alien contact itself may be more transcendent than physical in nature, but nonetheless real. And certainly our surveys have shown that to be the case. If 75% are out of body. So the contact can be physical, and these beings can be physical, inter and extra dimensional, hyperdimensional, and even time traveling intelligences interacting with human consciousness. And if I have time, I'll talk about a little 9-year-old that explained that he is a time traveler. And I'll explain to you what he said about his time traveling self. Many experiencers, particularly the young experiencers, have mentioned their past lives on other planets. But what was interesting for me more than anything else is, again, it's something that seems to be recalled more after an activation or awakening. But Tracy Taylor remembers consciously her contact with non-human cosmic race of beings occurred since before she was born. These beings were my family before I came to be in the earth domain, and I had a close relationship with them, which continued after my birth. I remember distinctly an 8-year-old who was in my office explaining to me that his ancestors were the Mantis beings, and when he dies, he will go back to being a Mantis being, which is fascinating, and he's not the only one. So, were we created by extraterrestrials? The download. Tracy Taylor was told one night she had this intense feeling before sleep in a process where she had little control. She wrote something beyond her present understanding, and it was contrary to everything she'd been taught. It said the human race had been created by extraterrestrials, contained information about genetic manipulation of human and extraterrestrial DNA to create another species. And we have evidence all through history. If we look at hidden archaeology with Michael Cremo, I think a metal hammer was found in rock that was many millions of years old. We have had these beings, I believe, as hybrids, and the pharaohs of ancient Egypt, I think certainly the suggestion is that some of them may very well have been hybrids. And this is of Akhenaten, a small fragment of desiccated brain tissue. We found his DNA had a higher cranial capacity because of the need to house a larger cortex. And the gene CXPAC5, responsible for cortex growth, suggests an anomaly which is visible in the image below. So this is fascinating in the sense that so much has been hidden from us, from giants, right through to these strange hybrids that had the skulls. And these skulls, these shaped skulls, have been found literally all over the globe, even in Australia. So we have to say, okay, so what's going on and what is it we don't know? Here we have again, his bone was denser and fundamentally different to the normal bone in similar mummies. So this is Akhenaten. Tracy Taylor has had downloads about our heritage. And this is fascinating because she had done this drawing many years ago, a black and white one, which were downloaded and drawn within 10 minutes. And she did several of them, like this one here. And she took this particular one, the all-seeing eye, with her. And it was found to be in Karnak, in Luxor, the identical all-seeing eye. So our connections are going back through history. So the new dawn of the 21st century. Scientists, there are scientists, and I'm going to try and say Vladimir and Maxim rather than the surnames, We are a hybrid species. There are a hidden message in human DNA. Their research concluded the genetic code was invented outside the solar system several billion years ago. It appeared to have an intelligent signal embedded in the genetic code, a biological SETI, which would have longevity in detecting ETs. There are recognizable hallmarks of artificiality, patterns irreducible to any natural origins. This is what they are suggesting about our DNA. And the DNA, I believe, is part of a part of the mystery. Interesting fact about DNA is 1 gram of DNA can potentially hold all the data stored on the internet. So what is stored in our DNA when we know that only 5% the geneticists understand its use, where 95 they used to call junk DNA, and they're still trying to work out what that DNA is. When we consider what may be in that junk or dormant DNA, that's the clue, I believe, to understanding more about ourselves. The scientists that admit there's a second DNA code which controls genes. So is junk DNA really junk? There is a second secret DNA code, a genetic code within the DNA is written on top of the DNA code scientists have already cracked. This has enormous implications. So the ancestors, who are they? Who are we? Molecular biologist Dr. Francis Crick, co-founder of the DNA molecule. He wrote in Life Itself, for life to form by chance is mathematically virtually impossible. The immensity of complex coded and precisely sequenced information is staggering. The DNA evidence speaks of intelligent information bearing design. Now, this is the interesting statement that I found compelling. They, he said, program the molecules so that when we reached a certain level of intelligence, we would be able to access their information and they could therefore teach us about ourselves. So what is that? What did they program into human DNA? If they program DNA so that at some evolutionary point, we would access the information that would teach us about ourselves, we could say, does this mean the technology that will show that we're hybridized, or something more profound? The free surveys indicated 26% gained information about upgrading of DNA. This means that DNA changes or mutates and will come, and that coming with age or response to vibrational changes within the DNA may be the activation. This is what Dr. Stamatopoulos, you can see over there, Associate Professor of the Genome Sciences, saying, codons can have 2 meanings. One, how the proteins are made. The other instructs the cell on how genes are controlled. Now we know that this basic assumption about reading the human genome is missing and is only half the picture. So what have we got here? Is the no junk DNA, just that we don't understand it. We know that DNA produces magnetized wormholes to other universes. So this is the multidimensional aspect of ourselves. Russian biophysicists and biologists explained the esoteric nature of DNA. They do not believe 90% of DNA is junk. They also found DNA can cause disturbing patterns in a vacuum, producing magnetized wormholes, tunnel connections between entirely different areas in the universe in which information can be transmitted outside of space-time. And it attracts information and passes them on to our consciousness, and explains clairvoyance, intuition, spontaneous and remote acts of healing, self-healing, affirmation, and how that works, because it's a frequency. Light auras around people, mind's influence on weather patterns, and more. So here we have understanding of how our consciousness acts through our physical DNA. So what is going on with us as a species? So many of those with encounters both children and adults are talking about the activation of human DNA and how that activation changes their awareness and also their understanding of themselves. You know, some will call themselves hybrids after this activation. Here we have a molecular biologist who sent me this information in 2010, and it confirmed much of what I had already learned. He said this: genetic modification is occurring right now in utero, producing a new human. He believes research would show dormant genetic regions are being integrated into the biological system, happening all of us, and producing expanded awareness. Information is encoded within the atomic structure of the DNA molecule. It can be accessed with greater efficiency to produce savant-like characteristics, more like remodeling the genome to make dormant regions accessible. Vast amounts of information and functional capacity is already there. This is what we're already hearing from other scientists. So, what does that mean? What does quantum reality mean? Accessing the multiverse, the evolutionary gateway to higher consciousness. So what does that, and this is where I found my work has been multidimensional, if you like, because so many coming to me as they access this awareness that whether it's clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairsentience, feeling, knowing, information downloads, a sense of communicating with other intelligences, not all physical. Some of them are interdimensional, as we talked about, and extra-dimensional. Perceiving spirits, having out-of-body experiences, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Healing abilities and energy work, heightened intelligence, downloads, past life awareness, senses such as telepathy, clairvoyance, clairaudience, remote influencing, past life recall, telekinesis, and also something that has always fascinated me, and an absolute, when people say to me, where's the evidence they've really had an experience? When you find an individual spontaneously articulating what we call these light languages or star languages, start writing symbols, creating unusual artwork, downloading music, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. All these things happen after they're activated or awakened to their multidimensional selves and their connection to these beings. So all of these things happening, including traveling through portals. So no junk DNA origins of the human language in DNA can be reprogrammed and can respond directly to the human word. We now know that language can actually reprogram DNA. So what are we talking about? So can DNA be altered? And through frequency, because human language is frequency. And this is the key, I believe, to the changing of DNA or activating DNA. These scientists have found that not only is junk DNA not redundant, the non-coding DNA follows definite structure and logic like a biological language. It forms words and sentences just like human language and follows grammar rules. The origins of language may be attributed to DNA. It is conceivable, they say, that the grammar itself serves as a blueprint for the development of human speech. So we have something really important here that is showing us the expressions that people are experiencing, such as light language, universal language, and children and adults are speaking these languages. What is happening to our DNA as they articulate them or use them for healing? Are they actually activating dormant DNA and helping us to awaken, if you like, to a greater reality? We now know that this can happen. Words and frequencies, it just has to be the correct language. They managed to modulate specific frequency patterns onto laser ray and with it influence the DNA frequency and thus the genetic information. It's all about frequency. And this is spoken about in depth in network intelligence. So these two scientists have gone into depth to see how they can actually use frequency and human language, in fact, to actually deal with illness and irregularities in DNA. They can actually do this without cutting particular genes. So the key, Nikola Tesla is saying very clearly here, if you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. This, I believe, is how individuals finally get activated, either on the spacecraft or through other means. It may be through a shamanic experience, near-death experience, out-of-body experience. It may be through having a healing, energetic healing. It may be through a grief experience. It may even be through hypnosis, where someone is taking you into revisiting an experience, and that activates that part of your memory and DNA. Dr. Marie Batchelor is featured in my book, The New Human. She's obviously a medical doctor. She had an awakening and activation when she was in India. She felt these galactic frequencies enter her, and from that time, she's been completely changed. She said, DNA is changed by frequency. I bring this in through my hands, my voice, and through the light language. She describes herself as a DNA, galactic DNA rewirer. That's what she's doing. DNA upgrades and activation through a galactic connection. She says to her clients, your mind will not understand it, but you will feel it. This is quantum reality, it's science. And I'm aware that I'm getting into the DNA and it's subatomic. The atoms, I feel we're changing from carbon-based to crystalline. DNA is changed by frequency. And this is the key, I believe. She also said, people don't realize the matrix is galactic. The gods of the old religions are really multidimensional galactic beings. She feels that she's become a modern shaman who better than one trained in 3D. I can activate the blueprint of my DNA, she said, and new programs within my patient's DNA, splicing their DNA using energy and frequency. The new DNA looks golden. As this is inserted, the rest of the DNA lights up for abilities. I feel we're changing from carbon-based to crystalline. I believe the new children are already activated, and I can concur with that. Working on another scientist where she lives in Melbourne, she got this feedback after a healing with Dr. Batchelor. And this is another scientist that had been working with her. The scientist said this, oh my goodness, I can see the matrix and what happened to the codes, all the transmissions. She said, I'm like Lucy in the movie. We're in the matrix. I can see craft overhead and they are transmitting frequencies to the people. I see codes like barcodes being put into their heads. I see everyone is programmed. I see the programs coming in. This has changed my life. I see things differently. It's interdimensional. And she said something also very profound. The new DNA looked golden. And I've heard this many, many times. And this is a former scientist having a session with Dr. Batchelor and what she actually experienced. What's been fascinating to me all through this is not just speaking to the adults that have had experiences, but the children. What I found profound about the children is their openness and their honesty. But not only that, what was fascinating was their conscious recall and the clarity of their conscious recall. So we're looking at frequencies as being very much a part of this activation or awakening to our multidimensional selves and our connection and communication with these intelligences. It's almost, we've got it encoded in our DNA when that activation will occur. And I believe for all of us, it's different. For some of us, it is as a child, we know. Sometimes we shut it down, and some wait until they're 40 or 50 or 70 before they'll own this is their experience. This young man, his mother wrote to me and said her son created through his experiences, he had this downloading of these songs. And he said these songs that she recorded were about shifting our DNA, songs needed to give people to wake them up. He was 11 when he channeled these music pieces. At no time did Matthew practice them. He named each one before playing it as though he knew what was coming next. He would repeat the notes in sequence, all of this in a few seconds. He said, it's like my hands are doing it by itself. I'm going to play you a very small, short piece called Decoding Human DNA. Remember, this is an 11-year-old speaking in this understanding. And I'll play this, a little bit of this for you. All of the songs now Matthew's mother has, and for those that are interested and want to know more about it, I can just email me and I can send it to you. But for me, what was fascinating was his understanding and the fact that I sent these songs of Matthew's to Juliana Oka, who is Japanese, who lives in California now and speaks about her own experiences, because she had similar experiences happen when she was a child. And I wanted to have her opinion of what she thought of Matthew's music. She said she believes he's contacted by aliens or master musical spirits. Amazing composition, genius. She liked it very much. She also mentioned her experiences happened as a child. When she was overtaken by the entity, she felt something similar to what he was saying, and she received amazing power. She wrote her story in One Life, Many Worlds, where she's had interactions with many otherworldly beings. She said the power she received when she was playing made her quite drained, and she crashed afterwards, as he also said he was exhausted. He's contacted by aliens or master musical spirits, and her experiences happened in childhood and went beyond. She called it genius. But is this just the odd, unique experience for a few? It seems it's happening globally. And I was very fortunate to be sent some information by a researcher from China. And this was fascinating because the story of this lady here is she wasn't only speaking, translating, and painting. She was playing instruments and writing poems with information. She had a dream of a person playing a kind of instrument above in a cloud. The music was, "Please welcome my friend." When she woke up, she wanted to play the piano, but didn't have one. At her friend's house, was surprised she could play the piano by hammering it. The music is like Chinese ancient style, and the Chinese people and Taoism believe music was from the sky. Let me show you how she plays. And streams of light as she's playing. In that particular recording, as I say, what's fascinating is you can see many orbs in as she's playing, and also streams of light. And if I've got time, I'll answer any questions on that, because I think that's very significant as well. Okay. Another female farmer in China suddenly began to speak and paint with universal language she never painted before. And just like Juliana Oka, who also is an artist, who was never taught how to paint and downloaded her pictures, beautiful pictures, as well as being a musician, this farmer also is explaining a little bit about her experience. I'll show you some of the fascinating pictures. What's fascinating too is that she talks about the unicursal method, which means she never took the pen off the paper the whole time she was doing the drawing. I'll show you those in a minute. So symbols, light language, they're all frequency. And this is what, again, is really important, because the frequencies are in the artwork, they're in the music, they're in the star languages, and these are the frequencies that seem to activate something within our DNA. And this is what Tracy Taylor, who's an artist, explains. I have also come to realize languages produce brain activity similar to meditation. This understanding I was given by the beings. The language contains particular vibrational frequencies that assist with the awakening and clearing of the pineal system to allow more open access to cosmic frequencies and remembrance and deep transformation and healing. So what is the purpose of the light language and symbols here? I'm going to play you a language by Antonio. He is a young man from New Zealand who calls himself an Arcturian ambassador. He's come to help with the ecology of this planet. The symbol you'll see here is one from him. It's got the script in it, as well as other activation codes, if you like. what the star language is, a more accurate representation of an individual soul vibration. It means that the language comes directly from the essence of the universal mind or God and links to all existence together. It bypasses linear space-time and one of the steps from words to telepathic communication. And this is what I'm hearing from many of those with experiences, that we are moving with our consciousness to going from verbal articulation into the telepathic communication many are able to access once they're on board craft. The ancient forms of communicating volumes of information without having to read pages and pages. Listen to the Arcturian language.
Summa tataka parakati sakata sita takata summa takat retika jinga tapatunsa hurka jingo taka parakatin sakata parakatin tataka matata sumrina tataka paraka rikingi ka kopataka parakatika singa taka sung patakit kuna pakatakiti sung patak sura patataki igrit sikata sinta tatata in hurka Ortikata, singata, hopata,
there are many different forms of star language I have come across now, and some of the children are speaking these languages at, 5 or 6, 7 or 8, and I recall very distinctly a script in my book Awakening where the mother got in touch with me and said her daughter could translate the script. She was all of 7. She lives here in Queensland. And I said, could I talk to the daughter? And the mother said, for sure. And when I spoke to her, I said, Mum tells me that you can read this script in my book Awakening. Oh, yes, she said. I said, could you read it to me? And she said, do you want it in English or do you want it in the language? And I said to her, can you do both? Oh, yes, she said. And she proceeded to use the language for the script and then translated it. And then I said to her, so what is the source of that language? And she said, oh, that one's the Greys. So she knew exactly the source. Sometime later, when I saw her again in a group, I was showing her a lot of different scripts. And I said, can you read any or translate any of these? And she did exactly the same thing with one script. She said some of them she couldn't translate, but there was one that she did. She did exactly the same thing and then told me the source was the Mantis and the Greys. Now, this is a 7-year-old being able to understand. So what they're being taught on the spacecraft and their origins obviously ties into that. And I'll go into the space schools in a minute. What I want to also show is how frequency changes our reality. And this is a particularly good one. This was recorded many years ago in a conference in Adelaide by the Sacred Resonance, Darren. And what was fascinating, he said that he was aware of having contact through his music, changing the frequency. And he was saying certain musical patterns can create resonance, and the right spirit is fused into the musical soundscape. What was really fascinating as he's playing these sacred sounds, what we noticed as we were taking digital photographs, that every picture showed an altered reality. And I think it's best just to show you. A very good indicator of how sound and frequency can change our reality. So here we have what Darren himself says, the higher intelligence has left humanity with musical cues, the frequency patterns encoded in ancient temples, so we can use them to create a positive contact culture. He gave a musical performance with sacred Hebrew words, demonstrating sacred language can create a portal. And I'm going to play a little bit of that. If I think it's the next slide. Here we go.
Family of God. Family of God.
Now, look at the digital photographs as he's playing. You notice already there seems to be a shift in the room. This was the second image that came through. Everything's shifted. Darren's here playing. You can see this strange light above him and these other interesting lights just around where he's playing. This is the next photograph. You can see an amazing shift. You can't hardly see Darren at all. And then finally this, after him playing those sacred music. What's interesting, and I put this together as an example of a young man called Josh, who explained his experiences with the light beings. And he said, I astrally visited the large ship with many other souls. There were a huge variety of beings. They were playful and incredibly wise and were able to shift their form at will from a humanoid shape to a ribbon of light. And as I saw them, they seemed to be composed of effervescent bubbles of energy. So is this the same as what we were seeing in Darren's, through Darren's music? So healing through symbols. This is a very fascinating account, again, from the artwork is from Antonio in New Zealand, again, putting his scripts and his symbols in much of his artwork. And this is one of the experiences that I'm sharing here. I feel grateful that my children are having these experiences. My children very seldom become ill. When they do, the ETs have provided my children with healing. I have awakened on several occasions to sense beings in the room, only to be put back to sleep rather quickly. I saw beings dropping symbols of energy into our bodies, and on one occasion witnessing a small black triangular healing device upon the bed towards my son's side. What we found with the free survey is 42.23% had healing by ETs, and there are many accounts now. Preston Dennett has written several books, and one of them about healing from UFOs. And it's quite significant that this is part of the experience that many people are having. It's almost 50%. Again, I'm going to give you an idea of how the younger generations understand their experiences. It has changed simply because a lot of the newer generations or younger generations have a different understanding and awareness of their experiences. Let me show you from this. It was a film by Caroline Corey, E.T. Contact, They Are Here. And this is a little bit, I'm going to mention Zach and also Antonio, you'll see in this video.
Sua set eleaka sulun tuk ewe, elo amana sala at elo, ala onkis susum ma etala, elo lu tuiki shisea, elo atsa osaetam mana kuleate su shase. Eomono tu keawa. Art etsunumu etulaat etulaakitsesa ese sala tushasam. It doesn't exactly translate into English. The key to this language is that it's not transmitting data verbally through the mind. It's transmitting images through the voice. And dolphins do the same thing. Dolphins can transmit pictures to each other, what they're seeing through sonar.
There have been times where I have spoken a language that is very representative of a particular civilization or a particular group of beings. And when I would speak it, they would be there on the other side, listening and sending back information.
Can you give a message that you feel is important in the star language? That's even better.
All right. I'll try this, okay?
One of the cases that was interesting to me was the mother wrote to me saying that her daughter had reacted to some of the star languages that she'd seen on YouTube. And the daughter said, but I can speak those languages too. And she said to her mother, there's 3 of them, but one of them heals water. When I speak at water, I can purify the water. And the mother told me that the water actually tasted differently. So what can we understand about these languages, and going back to the fact that DNA can be affected by human language? This young lady is going to explain to you how she understands where some of these star languages relate to human languages. And I'm going to let her speak for herself. She's actually Spanish, so I think her English is excellent, but she will explain how she understands some of these different languages and how we have developed them in the Terran languages, as she calls it.
An example of what English would sound similar like this. That every language of a star language tends to be similar to specific Terran languages. For example, the Arturian is very similar to the Japanese or Chinese, Vietnamese languages. And Andromedan is very similar to Spanish, which is the one that I'm going to talk about, which is the one that I'm going to speak. And for example, Syrian sounds very much like Egyptian or even Norwegian and all these Nordic, countries, languages, Astabat nan usar aurerus. This means something about reaching oneness in this planet, as a collective consciousness that we are.
I asked Dr. Lena Olson to explain a little bit about her understanding of the new human. She says, I do not believe these are broken genes, but offering a new multidimensional skills to prevent limited reprogramming of a third dimensional reality. ADHD, Asperger's, some forms of autism, dyslexia are letter people. She said the heightened physical senses of the letter person diet help to stabilize when stressed. And what she'd done as a molecular biologist, as well as an experiencer, was she tested the physical senses and found that all 5 physical senses were expanded in the letter person, or the new human, as I call it. Homonoeticus, there are lots of different names. And she noticed in sense of touch, in sight, you're seeing more of the visual spectrum. Hearing is a lot more sensitive. And she was saying both above and below normal range, aware of minute differences in shades of color than normal. Taste and smell are enhanced, sensitive to all frequencies, can feel overwhelmed by sensory overload, and sensitive to radioactive radiation, energy fields, energies beaming out of angry people, as well as love and happiness. I won't do the video, I'll just, that is in essence what she's saying. But she has explored this both as a scientist as well as an experiencer. And she writes about this in her understanding, and it's included in The New Human, where she says particularly ADHD need more vitamin Bs because they operate at a higher frequency. So the more we understand these new generations of human, which are given these labels in metaphysical terms, they're often called indigos, crystal children, children of light. There's a whole range of names which relates to their energy field and their frequency. But in the more standard model of understanding them, they are given these what I call dysfunctional labels. The New Human. Here we have another wonderful open-minded molecular biologist, Dr. William Brown. And he talks about these children. He said the exponential increase in autistic, ADD, and indigo children have the new genetic architecture, which allows them to see the world in a multidimensional fashion. The New Human and modification of the DNA, their brains work faster and they have more access to information. It's transgenerational information encoded within the atomic structure of the DNA molecule. It can be accessed more efficiently to produce savant-like characteristics. The modification of the DNA is more like a remodeling of the genome to make dormant regions accessible again. The hybrids are altogether a new species of human. And when I showed you Marina, the young lady from Spain, she relates to being a hybrid. And I'll explain a little bit more about that because there seems to be layers to the different types of New Human. Here she's talking about how she remembers and had this activation at 15 years old to remember more about herself.
At 15 years old, I made my consciousness shift because I came here with a wake-up call encoded in my DNA to wake up at a determined point in my life, which is something that many star children can with. And so I started to experience memory recalls of extraterrestrial contact, extraterrestrial incarnations, my own star system connections or expansions, also great expansion of my own psychic abilities. I became highly sensitive when it was with the external reality. I will be able to read more strongly the people's thoughts. I will be able to read their own energy, to read their own emotions, to read their DNA, their own genetics, their own connection to their star systems. And well, it can be very frustrating sometimes for star children because we are very sensitive. So I will recommend that if you pick up a negative energy, a low frequency energy, because you're very sensitive, I will recommend you that you not fight the emotion, that you do not fight that energy, because resistance is actually slowing down the process of getting out of that frequency. So ground into that energy and try to balance it, try to bring it into a higher frequency, try to transform it into love again.
So let's go to another young man, another teenager, should I say, who's a young man who is explaining his experiences as a hybrid and how he understands himself. The drawing itself is actually by Antonio of his Arcturian self. But what is interesting with this young man, Zach, this is how he talks about his hybrid nature. We already have their DNA in our bodies. And I think that's what Dr. Francis Crick was talking about, noticing that we are, in fact, intelligently designed species with a number of different species of ET, extraterrestrials, or star ancestors in our DNA. And they are activating it through frequency and light. Manipulation to expedite the evolution of humanity is how Zach understands himself. He was told he was hybridized for expressing the human genome. There are many different agendas on this planet, and each species has their own programs. It's not like hybridizing us by replacing our DNA with theirs. The consciousness we are vibrating with is the attributes we will take on. So if someone is strongly connecting to Arcturians, they will take on Arcturian attributes. If one is connected to the Greys, it's the same thing. You're connected to which creates the expression. So this is helping us to understand more of who we are. Jo Sivan Iskra is actually Australian, and she was given information by the Mantis beings, told that she's here on a mission to do with engineering of the species. In 2018, she said, I was with a tall mantis and benevolent reptilians. They took me to a massive lab built inside a cave-like structure. There were thousands of incubators with hybrids. They looked fully grown, ready. They had wings and it was hard to see their color as the lighting was very dim, but there was a bluish tinge to them. The mantis being told me, they, the mantis, were the keepers of the universe. They had blueprints and DNA for every species that had ever existed, including extinct species on our planet. They populate planets with life forms throughout the universe. They said they were proficient at genetically modifying humans. They saw their roles as master geneticists. And interestingly, an 8-year-old from the US was explaining to me after she'd had an experience a couple of nights before, and her mother, she told her mother she'd like to tell me about the experience. And over Skype, she said, Mary, they took me and they were showing me how to levitate and use my third eye. But they also showed me how they were genetically engineering different species. And this 8-year-old explained that she was told that they do this on many planets. They seed many planets depending on the genetic mix that will suit the planet. And that's from an 8-year-old. So very similar to what Joe has mentioned to me here. Zach wrote his understanding of this to me and explaining about the hybrid. The hybrids are expressing their consciousness through their DNA, as is the new human. The hybrids are part of the new human archetype we are evolving into. The labels don't matter. The humans are evolving, our DNA is advancing, and we will express that in any way possible, and it's contained in our DNA. There is scalar imprinted memories of all other beings in our DNA has passed through. We can express it in the new human template. Looking again at what 1 gram of DNA can hold in terms of information. We can express it in the hybrid forms such as indigo, crystal, etc. That is the energy we're expressing or perceiving through their reality lens and what we are emitting. They are all interconnected, but you perceive it as different if you wish to. One of the excellent books of those coming out as they understand themselves to be hybrids is this book, Meet the Hybrids by Miguel Mendoza and Barbara Lamb. Encapsulated in the book as a number of stories of individuals that relate to being a hybrid. Hybrids on Earth help raise the frequency of humankind so humans can evolve and embrace their cosmic family. With major paradigm shifts taking place, humanity is evolving into a new human. This means the DNA of humankind is changing, in which we are allowing them to expand in consciousness. Charmaine D'Orazio is Sayach is a wonderful lady from the UK. She, I've met her a number of times now, when I've gone to the UK, and she's told me a lot about her awareness of being part human, part reptilian. And she's actually a healer. She does some amazing work. And as I say, we have to be careful not to discriminate between various species, because you can't do that. For example, with Zetas, I was told, or the Greys, I was told there are at least 165 species of Grey. And there have been many loving interactions with reptilians, as well as those that have been less so and more self-serving. In this, she talks about herself as a hybrid in the book. There are various reasons for the hybrid program. They differ depending on species and if they are involved with the military, and that's another story. I believe one purpose for the creation of hybrids is to bridge the divide between ETs and humans, taking positive attributes from each race for certain purposes, such as healing, higher intelligence, and stronger spiritual connection, and so forth. These are some of the images drawn by Marina Seren, and her connection to some of them she explains. Again, she relates to being a hybrid. The purple is my female Arcturian guide, which is this one here. She saw her in dreams. The green being is her hybrid child, the genetic mix between her human DNA, the grey, the mantid, and Arcturian energy. So we're not just talking about one or two species into a mix, you may have several. The brown-eyed being is a human Zeta. This is a grey hybrid. The long-haired male is a Pleiadian guide. And the one below is Zeta she's seen in her dreams, helps to provide genetics between humans themselves to create hybrids. That one is this one here. What we have to also understand with dreams is many times you're having interactions with these intelligences out of body, which may translate into you feeling it's a dream. The difference is between a dream and a reality or experience is that dream stays with you for many years, whereas a normal dream you forget within a few minutes or few seconds even of waking up. And often, as I say, because you're either going out of body, and so it appears like a dream, or it's because you're in a trance state, because you're in an altered state when you get taken on board craft. 3 kinds of hybrids, and I've written these out in case you find Marina, the way she explains it is difficult to understand. But there are many labels here to different types of hybrids, and I'll let her explain them.
Hello, I am Marina, a 17-year-old lady from Spain, and about how I understand my hybrid nature. Well, first I will share that I can identify at least 3 forms of the expression of the hybrid energies on this planet. The first one is when a starseed incarnates in this planet. So first we have to understand that there are the 2 DNAs, the physical DNA and the metaphysical DNA. So the physical DNA will be the DNA that your parents from this physical plane, from this planet, gives to you. And the metaphysical DNA is the soul genetics. It's your own soul DNA. So when a soul incarnates the body, the genetics of the soul, the metaphysical DNA, mixes with the physical one. So when a soul that comes from another star system of a very high consciousness, of a higher frequency, incarnates into a body on this planet, he expresses more of these extraterrestrial genetics. He expresses a higher frequency structure of the DNA. You know, he or she actually expresses a DNA with more connected codons, with more connected genetics, you know. So it's actually a new different structure. The codes of the DNA are more connected to the previous generations. and they are actually vibrating at a higher frequency and expressing more of the extraterrestrial DNA, you know, specifically those who are more connected to the soul genetics, you know, Arcturus, Pleiades, Sirius, whatever. So the second form of hybrid that I will identify is when a starseed awakens, or when a human awakens. So in this case is when you make the consciousness shift and you awaken to your multidimensional self, to your multidimensional nature, or to your essence as unconditional love. When you reconnect with your own star systems, you know, in that moment you are actually expressing a higher consciousness, and the DNA is vibrating on a higher frequency and expressing also the extraterrestrial DNA that you're awakening within you. So you express, if you connect to Arcturus, you express the consciousness of Arcturus. And so it is with other star systems, for example. So that will be also an expression of a hybrid, because it's actually reactivating the codes of the DNA, reawakening the DNA. So the third one is my own personal case, and is when an extraterrestrial race gives you alien genetics. For example, my mom was adopted when I was an egg, and she was pregnant on me, and they will genetically alter me, putting their own genetics into me. So I will also express their own consciousness, their own energy through my own DNA, you know, in this incarnation.
So Marina actually, I think, speaks really well, given that it's a second language, to explain a little bit about how she understands the levels of hybrid. And I think we're only just beginning to get a sense of how complex this is. I'm going to mention Jo Iskra here again, and her understanding of the hybrid children. A number of visions of my half-human children. I recall many experiences of waking up at times, crying, the feeling of having left children somewhere and being quite disturbed about it. We do know that many have what we call missing pregnancies, and I talk about this in Awakening, where they're aware of being pregnant for a short time, maybe a month or two, and then suddenly the sense that the pregnancy is gone, and the feeling of grief and loss. And a lot of these women then mention that they have been taken on board craft and introduced to their hybrid children. And this is what Jo is saying about the drawing here. The child in the drawing appeared whilst I was awake like an apparition. She indicated her love and connection with me telepathically. She looks very similar to my daughter. There is something different about these kids. I knew she must have been around 20 years old at the time, but she still looked so childlike and innocent. Her aura was pink, and she told me she was okay, and she always knew where I was. This happened in a matter of seconds, and she was gone. I have many other stories, and I'm not sure if I've got time to talk about them afterwards, of a similar experience with others that have seen their children, and not just on board craft, but actually physically. And this is one of them. A former flight attendant used to see a loving feline being she felt was her mother. Now, this is Amanda. She is a beautiful lady I met when I was in Brazil. And the dream of the woman, and this is the woman here, which looks very feline, said that she was 3 meters tall, thin with a cat-like face, loving, and she felt this very maternal love from this being. And then she explained she had several dreams where beings came to her room, held her hand, and they flew to a spaceship in the sky. They were teaching me about spirituality. One of them was talking about chakras, and from his hand came light, each time a different color, that came over her body. So that there were not just the feline beings, but there were other beings that she was having interactions with. But this is the fascinating one. We're talking about a missing pregnancy here. In 2002, Amanda said she woke up thinking she was at the doctor's. At her feet was a being with dark, huge eyes. And a few days later, she felt a little ball on the right side of her uterus. And that was, and as time passed, that little ball was gone. Very typical of what we call the missing pregnancy. And I write about this in Awakening. In 2008, leaving my hotel room, I saw a little girl about 4 or 5 years old. She didn't open her mouth, but I could hear a voice inside my mind saying, "Mummy, mummy." I understood the child was looking for her mother. I asked, "Where is your mum?" Her face changed. She had bigger black eyes. Her mouth looked swollen and she could read my thoughts. And I was so scared, I ran away thinking she was a monster. And this is the drawing Amanda has done of what she saw. And then she said, the last time they took me to the spaceship, they showed me my hybrid kids and the girl I saw at the hotel in 2008. She was bigger, like a pre-teenager, and I realized she was part of another race, but she was also my daughter. And this is the image she's drawn of these other hybrids and her daughter. I understood she was a hybrid of the same race as the woman with the cat face I always saw since I was a child. This feline woman sometimes brings her to see me or to play with my 6-year-old daughter. And there's more to the interest there, but the 6-year-old daughter literally playing with a hybrid sister. So we're getting into such complexity in terms of our relationship with these intelligences. I'm going to give you more information on something that I'm to a certain extent may challenge some of you, because what has been coming to me from many of the children is some of their abilities. And this may challenge some of you, but I'm going to show you a little bit of left brain logic to go with it. I'll explain it as I go along. These children, some of them say they can communicate with animals, some of them communicate with plants, and some with crystals. And this little boy was 6 when he was filmed by his mother, and he's communicating, as he says, with a meteorite. And I want to play this for you because I'm then going to show you a little bit of information that may help you with the understanding of that.
So well, I'm back and I'm gonna actually show you that rocks seem like they're actually living. This little meteor, it is a meteor, told me, because here are the things that they have. One, they can actually communicate. They're not like actually like living like we are, like breathing or sneezing or coughing. They communicate through your mind. So if you find that key, this one, it is right here. And so you can put a finger on it, and then you can actually hear it talking in your head. It sounds like your own voice, but it's really the rock. 2, they have feelings. This rock told me when I was crashing down to earth and people were scared, it made it feel sad. And it got happy when I was in the water rolling from it for an adventure. And it was also, and now I'm getting ahead of myself. So number 3 is to actually have friends. The meteor told me it made friends with a pufferfish and a shark.
Now, I'm probably challenging a few of you there, but I want to explain why I think it's really important for us to start understanding that everything is connected, including things that we would not normally expect to be connected. And I'm going to use a bit of science to help with that possible cognitive dissonance. that some of you may have with this one. Dr. Harry Oldfield is a scientist and has the Center for Biofield Sciences. And he's showing you the energy field through his PIP technology, which is polycrast interference photography, shows interference between human energy fields and a clinically established lighting environment. Not quite Colin, it's different to that. He's an inventor of this. He's got the School of Electrocrystal Therapies working with healers and crystals using pulsed high frequency electromagnetic stimulation of crystals to correct and rebalance human energy fields. He's successfully treated thousands of patients this way, and he discovered that when crystals were added to the electromagnetic field, the healing took a quantum leap. And this polycrast interference photography has also shown him, when he's been in various environments, the non-physical realm, including spirits, including entities, etc., etc. And he said this system captures changing patterns of light energy emanating from all living things, humans, animals, and crystals. It shows many patterns when a trained eye can relate to the person's energy. Now you're going to see something that Dr. Oldfield kindly loaned me of a video of a sentience or intelligence in a crystal that he took through this PIP technology. First of all, here is what they look like. That's the image of this sentience coming out the crystal, but I'm going to show you some video in a minute. He also teaches people how to do healing with his particular technology. The image here is an entity taken with a PIP machine, but I'm going to show you the video now.
This is where we first saw, for the first time, crystal entity come out of an occupied crystal here, quartz. Belonged to my friend Helen, and we're going to see an amoeboid form that will emerge from the crystal. Here we go. Here's the entity, crystal entity, and it has amoeboid movement. It's called Snoopy by Helen, and because of it snooping in and out of the crystal. And there it's gone back in. And it caused interference to the computer, which stopped it. Now here we've got a crystal entity that's more shy than the other one, and takes a little time to be swept. There's that, the white glow is the actual entity itself inside the crystal. Here we are. The owner of this crystal is now coaxing it out with some gentle words of encouragement. And in a moment, you'll see it manifested outside the crystal. Please be patient with this because it is worth seeing. Here we are. Ah, well, here we are. That's it now, manifested. Top of the crystal. And there are hand movements going on. You notice that the creature itself stays in the same position. If that was just a reflection now, it would be changing all the time. It's starting to go back in the crystal. And there is a reason for that, because something comes into the room and it senses its presence. And it was a little cat by the name of Katie. And Katie was in hunting mode. They're looking for something, as if for a mouse. But when the cat was out the room, it reappeared.
I hope you found that interesting. There's other video that I've seen by Dr. Oldfield, where he's shown someone doing crystal healing and the entity comes out of the crystal during the crystal healing. So our understanding of what is conscious and not conscious, I think, needs reappraising, because we're getting more of an understanding through new technologies of how our multidimensional reality or the hologram or the matrix actually is conscious. Also, because crystal healing is done by many of those that are having experiences, they're taught how to use the crystals for healing. Dr. Lena Olson is one of them. She's a molecular biologist who's had healing by these many different beings, including the Mantis being. And here she says this: I was taught healing techniques from my non-visible friends, how to enhance and direct my energy, and the cone heads and the golden Buddha later proved to be, and the Mantis being. So she's seen many different types of beings, how to partly leave my body and be able to go into client's body and feel the problem. I do the same thing to connect their past lives or problems in the present that can cause imbalance. She corrects this imbalance and reloads them with higher frequencies. So a lot of those that have had encounters, had experiences, find that they are able to do work with frequencies, just like Dr. Marie Batchelor, and they work with frequencies to actually help heal other people. I'm going to show you this as well, because it relates to crystals and the crystal skulls for those of you that may be interested, because this came from a wonderful young lady in Australia, Lee Capitelli. And Lee talked about when she was, her past life in Atlantis, where she was using her own crystal skull to download, like, if you like, a hard drive. And I'll let her explain a little bit about that, just to also intrigue you and to show you that there is so much still we're learning via our interactions with these beings.
One of the things that's really interested me, and I know a lot of people are interested in, is, you know, the crystal skulls that have been surfacing. Now, I know you have a particular interest in the crystal skulls. Could you say why it's important or interesting to you?
Okay. Back in Atlantis, I was a researcher over there, and I was selected at that time for my skull to be scanned for my head and made into like a crystal USB drive, so like a hard drive in a way. And I would be the only one who would really tap into it. Of course, there were keepers of the skulls; they could similarly do the same thing, but it was the more generalized. For me, I could tap into my skull, and I could talk to it. It was sentient. It was as if it was talking to another person, really. But it was kind of like a computer in a way. Like you just access information, you download information. When I was working there at the time, the skulls were never kept in the city. That's one thing. Like we never kept the skulls in the city. we always kept them in places like in vaults, like these certain areas where they will be protected from certain environmental factors, or, you know, sometimes, you know, thieves every now and then, you know. So they just kept them hidden away, protected, you know, from damage and all sorts of things. And I would, like, once I would learn, I'd get a whole bulk of information I've acquired over the month or so. They would bring in the skull, bring in my skull, and I would put that in telepathically. I would put that in, you know, through waves of energy into it. That's, you know, to store information. And then actually, yeah, and they would ship it off again a couple of days later or 3 days. So yeah, that's the way it was done with the skull. And I was very happy to learn that that skull actually survived.
So is it such a stretch then to think that perhaps, you know, within the crystalline nature of these skulls, there is a sentience or an ability to retain information? And that's really what I'm wanting to show you. So when these individuals start talking about this, maybe it's time we start to listen. Antonio, the New Zealand, was 17 when I spoke to him, but he was given a school project in New Zealand, and I found this quite fascinating, a school project from him. He produced the model of technologies resonating on pure light and sound with crystalline generators to increase the vibratory level of the physical world by crystals around the pyramid. He stated those in the pyramid could project the vibration of those inside the pyramid and send it around the globe. This was done as a school project in New Zealand, which I find absolutely fascinating. And Tracy Taylor, many years ago, was, she saw in a dream the Wandjina, which is the indigenous Australian drawing of these beings. And she saw a similar thing, holding a crystal for healing, an amethyst crystal for healing. So they are connected. The Australian indigenous Aborigines, this is one drawing by them. This was an artist who gave it to someone I know very well and explained the planets are half a day's journey. They're friendly and just watch the Aboriginal way of life. They have no guns, spears, or weapons. The air on their planet is food. Their green uniforms protect from earth diseases. These space people speak all languages. The elders say the space people showed them how to grow food, find water, and showed them amethyst stones for healing. And this is the life on the stars beyond the Milky Way, the connection to the Seven Sisters constellation. The ghost messenger from the constellation of Delphinus, who's represented by the owls. This is again another drawing of the owls and the screens that the owls can be for the Zetas. This is a drawing from an experiencer who said she initially saw an owl, but then it shifted into a Zeta form. And here we have the orbs of light, which they said were spirits. I believe they're spirits, they're interdimensional, and many of them have intelligence. And one of the interesting things from a regression, a 15-year-old said, I volunteered to come back. I chose to do this. I've been on Earth 27 times. And this was a young man with his family who'd been taken on board craft with his mother and grandmother. And he was actually quite anxious about revisiting this. And I'd worked with his grandmother, and she had such an amazing positive response to understanding her experiences that she persuaded him to go ahead. And this is his experience in the regression. He said, when the grey beings arrived, I was in my garden. Now I can see orbs, whitey gold and two smaller ones. They're here to make me feel warm. They are family. The big one is Great Nana. The other's Nana's dad and great grandfather and granddad's brother. They are here to make me feel comfortable, to reassure me. They come with the greys to support me, make me comfortable so I won't be frightened. Now, this is the fascinating piece to this, as far as I was concerned, is when the Greys left, the orbs of light went into the craft with them. And he said, they don't mean to frighten us. So the orbs of light are definitely connected in certain cases with the non-human intelligences. Kathy of 9 said the beings are located at the edge of the universe in the white light. The light orb is sent to protect us. My little brother has a blue orb that protects him. And here we have healing done by an orb of light. Some of you may be aware of it. It was Jim Schaefer, who sadly is no longer with us. He had this amazing vision, which he filmed one night when he'd asked for healing. And this orb entered his room. He filmed it. And afterwards, he noticed that the orb entered his body. And some hours later, he found that he was healed. And he believes they wanted him to be healed. And I'll show you very briefly what he filmed. It's a bit noisy, but you can see the orb which enters his body. He said, I believe they wanted me to witness and record this event. I don't know why I was healed, but he believed he had unusual genetics, Rho negative, which is very common with many experiences. I've been changed, he said, very empathic towards animals and caring about the state the planet's in. Now I'm going very briefly to the space schools, or the secret school that was mentioned many years ago and written about by Whitley Strieber, about his education by these beings. I know he had a lot of, lots of people had big issues with the fact that he talked about being taught on the craft. He said, remembering the journey outside of time he was taught was another step. He got 9 lessons, which involved the manipulation of time, because learning how to use time as a tool is a key to reaching higher consciousness and real relationship with the beings. Quantum hologram, multidimensional education. I'll briefly give you some of the things, those that have come to me and talked to me about what they've been taught on the craft. They've been taught how to pilot spacecraft, how to navigate star maps. In the free survey, 24% operated craft. Shown advanced technologies, what powers the craft had. Consciousness, souls, spirit moved into another form that's non-human, and I'll talk about that if I have time. Shown genetic engineering of different species, both on and off world. Healing procedures on board. The nature of black holes and wormholes to decode and understand scripts, symbols, light languages. Time travel technologies taken on missions on Earth and off-world, taught advanced physics technologies to create non-polluting energy sources, ecologically friendly environments, and interstellar capabilities. Free again mentions that in the surveys of 42%. Magic school, a white light comes through the window. Do you have any good dreams last night? The mother asked her son. Yes, Mum, I finished magic school. What did you learn? Everything, mostly science. I learned about space and gravity. Time controls everything. Time controls all. She said, my son says that a white light comes through the window and suddenly he is there at the school. This is an image by Marina, the Spanish young lady, of her time on the space school, what it looked like. She was taught the relationship between pi, the Fibonacci sequence, geometry, numerology. The drawing shows the moment in which she replied to a question. She said they were happy for us to participate. They don't teach like Earth School teachers. Their education is interactive, telepathic, creative, and joyous. They took the spacecraft around some beautiful places in space for us to observe and enjoy. This is some of the downloads of physics that Marina has been given. I won't go into all of them now, but a great deal of spiritual understanding, structure of creation, geometry, science, consciousness. synchronicity of logic and spirituality, the why of geometry in the universe and its spiritual meaning, etc., etc. Really complex science. And when I asked an 8-year-old what he was taught on the craft, when he said he went there with a couple of his school friends and explained that he was taught very complex things, and I said to him, can you explain to me some of the complex things you were taught? And he said to me, I can't tell you that because it's too complex for you. So I was put in my place well and truly. My astral form. Now, again, this is a young child of 7 drawing his astral form with symbols. And he explains he connects people to their angels. Before I came here, I was just a will-o'-the-wisp spirit angel form. I programmed my life on Earth and decided my star mission and found myself in Mummy's tummy. My home planet, star, is Elba. I'm visited by beings which look like skeletons. He has incarnated as an animal as well as a human at the time of the dinosaurs, draws symbols, visits other places beyond his consciousness, perceives energy fields, feels his mind and body has changed in some way. He's traveled to the moon in another life. He says he can go to the 9th dimension and his thoughts can affect lights. Another young man who lives in Queensland was only 9 when he was telling his grandmother that he could see portals. After playing with his spirograph, my grandson was excited to tell me that what he'd drawn was exactly what portals in the bush around his home looked like to him. And this is the drawing. And I've put one there of a portal. And this is in The New Human, a 9-year-old. Eli says, you can go to Orion and back at one time. You had to go via Mars. Now the technology means you can go there directly. You can go in 2 ways. One in your mind and one in your body. It's a frequency thing. We're back to frequencies again. I have a questionnaire for children. This young man more or less filled the whole of the questionnaire. 10-year-old identifies as a center seed. He can connect directly to the core of the planet to heal the planet, and its pollution is his mission. He recalled choosing his mother and going through a portal to be born, panicked back to begin with, thinking he'd landed in the wrong tummy, but found it was okay. His first Earth life, speaks light language, which is triggered if someone needs healing. Telepathy, he says, is a root patterns in his head. He speaks about beings that created this dimension. He works with crystals, perceives interdimensionally with his eyes open, awareness of many dimensions, timelines, and struggles to focus on one timeline where his physical body is. Center seed means the ability to heal the planet of its pollution, rebalance the environment for everyone, not just humans, but animals and plants. This is an image of what said he looked like on that other planet. He's even got the symbols and what those symbols mean. I asked him, I said, can you tell me what the symbols are on your leg? And he said, this one's me, this one's my roots, and this is the center of the planet. He said he remembers his previous body with the blue body, his planet being destroyed, and Zach was saved by a flying craft. This is another young man of 7, Hayden, who explains that he can go to other planets through a portal in the runes. He just needs to know the mathematical number. This is one of the planets that he says he creates. Very briefly, this is how some of the children are now being helped to expand their consciousness. This is actually something to do with seeing beyond physical sight. It's taught by Nicola Farmer and Karen Osborne, who is actually Canadian. And this young man here is actually doing that. This was the first one which was done here in Agnes Water, where I live. The course was done here to start with. And this young man was one of those that was also taught it in Agnes to start with, although he's expanded his abilities in amazing ways now. I'll show you just briefly what he can now do in this bit of video. And I'm keeping an eye on the time because we're getting on.
Yellow and pink.
Good. Can you tell us what happened when you went to school to demonstrate to your teacher?
Well, I put tissues under my mask, so I passed the mask to my teacher, and the teacher couldn't see anything and told all the students. So I just went ahead and told people to hold up as many fingers as I could. I got them all right, and I asked my friend John to go and get a Finding Wally book, and I showed everyone where I found Wally. And afterwards, all that, after the whole day, everyone asked me to teach them, and I even told them that they can do it, they just forgot how to.
What happened now with this lovely young man is he's actually been able to drive around their block with the blindfold on, missing trees without any problem whatsoever. And his sister is doing similar things. This is being taught globally. Nicola Farmer does it in the UK and travels overseas. But what he's saying here is that everyone can do this. It's just that many have forgotten. I'm nearing the end of my presentation. Some of you will be delighted, I'm sure, and some maybe want to hear more, I don't know. I want to mention what Peter, a young man in America, explained, and I think this is interesting because of what they know about what's hidden. This young man, Peter, ADHD again, often they have one of these labels. He said, we left something on the moon. Something happened before he died in a previous life. He said he had a peaceful death, but he did say we've left something on the moon to help Earth. I was sent to help. It works with consciousness. A portal used magnetic energy to physically move people or ships, and also to work as a time machine, but would only send your consciousness to a different time. And of course, we've got many images now of the high strangeness on the moon for anyone who wants to see that. I've put a few there to show some of the artifacts that are on the moon. There are a number of children that have told me that the moon is hollow and there are beings under the surface. The moon is a created structure like many Faladafa practitioners. I've recalled some of my past lives. I've been reincarnated many times. I was once reincarnated during the prehistoric age into a highly developed technical society. Their technology was more advanced than ours today. Many of the technologies we now consider impossible were common occurrences. For example, they manufactured the moon to shine in the dark night on Earth. I was an engineer at that time. I was involved in constructing the moon. I remember the moon was not only hollow, but filled with all kinds of precision, control instruments, and gear systems. The degree of precision of the machine was far ahead of our most advanced science and technology today. This was translated. So we've got, again, from other cultures, those that have the awareness and are talking about a lot of hidden technology. The recall of past lives, Eli in The New Human. There are lots of moons that are artificial around Saturn and Jupiter. People are affected by them. They target people who are special and stop them going higher than the machine. An AI computer programs from underground satellites and radio towers monitoring the field of consciousness to see where people are at. They are creating another moon which will do the same thing. I think that before I conclude, one of the most fascinating parts of this is to understand the aspects of our multidimensional awareness and the fact that our consciousness is not confined by the physical body, and why we need to study consciousness. Paul mentioned to me, and this is a young man in Queensland, his ancestors were the Mantis, but when he goes on the craft sometimes, he evaporates, he calls it, into his mantid form. It's like a bit like steam, he says. That's how he experiences his soul or consciousness moving into the mantis form. And he said, you just think it, that's how it happens. I've now spoken to numerous experiencers that have mentioned on board craft, they may be in they may have gone into another form. One young lady explained that she was in a Zeta form as a scientist. And I said, well, where's your human body? And she said, well, it's sort of over there waiting for me. And I said, how do you get back to your human form? And she described a ball of light leaving the Zeta form and reanimating her human form to come back to planet Earth. And this, I don't think, is as unusual as we might think. In the free surveys, 15.18%, 18% talked about ET soul swapping with the human. 82% believed in a connection with beings pre-birth. And Paul talks about the mantis as being his ancestors. And I'm touching briefly on walk-in souls. This is Kaza, a young woman, she's a mother now of 4 children, was told that some years ago that she was had an autoimmune disease, 3 months to live, sent home basically to die. She was healed by light beings. She said there were bright light symbols on her head, and she was healed. Had since 2 more children. And with the near-death experience on a 4th child, she did a soul swap. By that, I mean a walk-in. A walk-in soul. And she says that the new soul, it comes from the 13th dimension. It's a place full of compassion. And she said, in that dimension, I'm just a light form. I don't have a name or a body. And what is interesting with that, there are so many now that are also relating to being walk-in souls or soul swaps. And Sheila Sheppy is one of the ladies. If anyone wants to connect that feels they're a walk-in soul, she has written a wonderful book on this. Her 2nd child said his friends have golden hair and look like cats or tigers. He will play and talk to them. Every night he'll see one of his friends who sends him to school. The school is like a Star Wars school. The kids there learn different things like healing with crystals or working with energy. A 10-year-old in England explained to me he came through a portal in the sun. Many of the children born these days have memories intact from their previous existence on board craft as extraterrestrials. They're kept on track by continuing their interaction with their cosmic family while they're in human form. In the free survey, 96% of ETs travel to and from other dimensions. And this is a picture of the sun and some craft that seem to be coming through it's as a portal. How do I connect to my real home? This young man talks about being a ball of light. He uses his spiritual mind. He connects through spirit. He doesn't talk through human. He speaks his spiritual light language. I say it through my soul, he said. And that's how I connect to my real home. I do have a home here, but I also have a home where I really belong. I can see with my eyes closed, see through other people. I go out of body to protect other people from negative beings. And he also has advice for other star kids. Energy centers on the planet have the frequencies. Crop circles have the frequencies that are activating those that are ready to be activated. Eli, 9 years old, explained to me he needed to go to energy centers, sacred places in Palenque. He received the names of the star systems and coordinates. In Chichen Itza, he received information about the pyramids and water, the power source energy, and the pyramid equals a portal where when water is near. Portal is when you are near energy. The water, if it's pure, it's a source of energy. The water powers the portals to other dimensions. It powers it up, basically. Water is multidimensional. So he's explaining that pyramids, literally, if they're surrounded by water, are charged, and you can go home. You can go into it with a special code, a frequency. You go into your mind and tune into the frequency, and you can travel through portals. So in my last few slides, Dolores Cannon, some of you may well know, she's written some wonderful books. Convoluted Universe is one of several series. And she also came to the conclusion from her hypnosis with many hundreds that DNA is being expanded to 12 strands. And one of my favorite ufologists, someone I met a number of times, and I have great respect for him. Sadly, he's no longer with us. Just prior to his death, very much in the last few years, he explained that he was an experiencer. He'd been on the craft and admitted that he was told that Homo sapiens originated from 12 different species of non-human. And he said, we're in transition. I have seen the future and it's glorious. 12 new groups of DNA activated by remote control. Dr. Olson said, if my information is correct, there will be 12 different main groups of new DNA people. It corresponds to 12 different main groups of ET, alien DNA donors, so 9 more to go. There our DNA is activated mainly by remote control, frequencies, so it's like putting a virus in software computer program. They will give off energy patterns that spread to the surroundings, and almost like the flu or GMO genes can contaminate via frequency patterns. Human DNA has the ability to transform. The information of the donors is there, a hidden key. This key can be activated when the person is ready to be contacted. The activated ones spread a signal to wake others up. I feel they're speeding this up. Homus novus is here. Lee Capitelli told me many years ago that we're being upgraded to Homonoeticus, a species in transition. Homo novus is trying to wake up humanity through drawings, music, sacred sites, all born after 2000 are Homonoeticus. They are literally the next step. They'll be able to do things that Homo species never dreamed of. Many are activated in their pubescent years, just as Marina was. The new human is not so simple as foreign DNA. It's a combination with souls from different places in the universe, incarnating in these improved bodies. The souls have different frequencies, vibrations, depending on their evolutionary status, which plays a role in activation of the DNA. I believe we also have to take into account the collective soul of Homo sapiens. Cosmic agenda, 78% believe changes they've undergone are part of an evolutionary unfolding in the free survey. The book itself has wonderful information on all of the surveys, 600 to 700 questions. 80 to 6% experience a sense of purpose, 73% highly positive, 74% thinking more holistically, 54% feelings of compassion increased, 91 felt more connected to living things, 67 there are powerful cosmic forces to spiritualize the planet, 73% believe we're living through a time of accelerated spiritual evolution, 72% their encounters occurred to awaken them to existence of cosmic forces, 72% evolutionary forces are at work to transform humanity, and 85% experience psycho-spiritual transformation. They believe we're on the verge of a new age, and the new non-human intelligences have a role in this. This is a new dawn for humanity. The new human beings have no idea how amazing they are, but they have to believe it first.